Hi, I'm Mark Mazzaferro, and it's time for another episode of On the Beat. And with us, as always, on the beat is Vacaville Police Chief John Carli. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good, glad you're here, and we're going to kind of recap some of the major accomplishments in the department in 2015. You officially started in 2014, right? Was it?
That's correct.
Middle of 2014?
It was in April 2014.
Oh, okay, all right. So this is one whole year under your belt.
Yes.
So let's talk. What happened in 2015? I noticed crime's down.
Good year. Crime was down. It was down around 15% overall, which we appreciate because the community, one of our goals is safety, and it isn't just what we find in crime in numbers, it's also the sense of, do you feel safe? You know, are you afraid when you go out of your house, when you go to the store, things like that.
Right. And I think generally people feel safe in our community. Wouldn't you say that's a fair statement, isn't it?
A very fair statement.
Yeah.
When you think of so many people who live here and work here, the sense is they like this community, it feels safe, and it feels like home.
Now, we were talking before we started filming about how we had no homicides last year, which, as I remember seeing the stats, and I'm driving home and I'm thinking, you know, it's good that we had no homicides, but I think it's even more remarkable, and you said this yourself, a city of our size not having any homicides. That's great.
It is. You never know what a year is going to bring because there's always the chance of family violence. Street crime violence is what often causes fear in a community. And so to have a year without any street crime violence or even domestic violence that results in a homicide is an incredibly good year. It's been nearly a decade since we can say that there's been no homicides in a year. Right,
and I think that's huge for our community, and certainly kudos to your department and what your guys and gals do every day. But even though there's lots of good news, there's also some not so good news in terms of thefts, robberies. Explain, if you don't mind.
I will. It's an interesting thing. Numbers are how you're evaluated nationally. But to just kind of simplify it so everyone in our audience understands it, there's what we call Part 1 crimes and there's Part 2 crimes. Part 1 crimes the FBI evaluates. So in that category, robberies, so the idea of a theft by force or fear, it's not a burglary, which is if somebody steals something from a home when you're not there, went up around 25%. Now that number may seem significant because we had about 75 the previous year and close to 100 in this last year. So we did some research, and what we found is with the shifting of the law in Prop 47 from the fall of the prior year, the thefts have increased significantly. And the thefts, whether they're from a store, why break into a home that has a prison sentence in the state prison when most thefts at a store are now reduced to a misdemeanor, sometimes just a citation. So it emboldens people. They go to a store, they commit a theft, and Vacaville, being the unique community that it is, stands up and says, not in my community.
Right.
So the theft then turns into some form of resistance, which turns it into a robbery. So that's the trend we're seeing.
And I guess potentially that could lead to, you know, someone who owns a store taking things into his own hands. You know, I mean, I don't want to predict that, but you know, if I was a business owner and I was having people steal from me at some point, you know, your hands are tied to a certain extent thanks to Prop 47 and all these changes. But you know,
it does make a difference. A business owner may say, "I'm tired of being taken advantage of," while other businesses, and I think the shift in the culture is a more hands-off approach. Businesses in the retail industry don't want to face lawsuits, and so they generally have encouraged their staff not to get involved.
Right.
Well, then that educates an organized criminal element within the Bay Area to come up and down the I-80 corridor thinking that in Vacaville the same thing is going to occur. And you know, we enjoy having a strong retail established corridor. And so coming into Vacaville, that doesn't necessarily pan out the same way. The police get called, it turns into some maybe just stealing by force or a robbery, and it just increases the chance for it turning from a theft to a robbery.
Well, in crime stats, this is my own personal opinion. I think our department does such a great job that in terms of not only dealing with crime but apprehending folks, that it makes our stats look higher than other communities who don't do such a good job, or or communities where people are so fed up they stop calling the police. I mean, it's like, why call them? It's not going to do any good. So there's lots of crimes that don't get reported in some of these other communities that I think people already know they're not safe, but it just kind of skews the way people perceive us.
That's correct. Our level of service is, if there's a crime, we want to capture that it occurred so that we can stop the trend from occurring. And our goal isn't always about, and I preach this, don't show me outputs, show me outcomes.
Right.
If we can reduce the crime that's occurring, great. We do that in partnership with the community. But I want to solve it as well. And so we really do enjoy a strong working relationship in the community, and what I believe is an exceptional team in our ability to solve a crime that does occur, to the degree that we capture those statistics, and while they're only numbers, we set goals and they are quite high. Are what we would consider our Part 1 crimes. We generally solve between 65 and 75% of those.
Right. And even the homicides, there were 2 last year and those were cleared.
That's correct.
So
they're
more good news.
Yes.
Right. So, well, speaking of outcomes versus output, is that what you said?
Yes.
Let's talk about the Homeless Roundtable and our efforts in dealing with homelessness in our community.
Well, considering that my goal in working throughout the whole last year was to bring stakeholders together, have a partnership between the government entity that most people think, can we solve the problem? No, we can't. This is a social issue within our society. So the goal really is to bring the local stakeholders together in a way that puts responsibility on them, working in partnership. So the roundtable over the last year has strengthened. We've done our part within local government through ordinances and also enforcement in a compassionate way, and many people who do attend and are beginning to hear the phrase, it's not about a hand up or a hand, the handout is not what we want.
Right.
It's a hand up. And so if somebody's just looking for the handout, that's what people saw with the panhandlers.
Right.
So we eliminated that through ordinance.
And they've disappeared.
They've disappeared.
I saw a guy the other day, and boy, did he stick out. But he wasn't there very long.
No.
So
People are calling, and what we do is we educate them right away that the idea that you're going to come in and stand on a street corner, we will regulate through legal action the time, place, and manner. And it's been effective this last year. People have all but said, the panhandling's all but dried up. And it doesn't mean it's taken away a person's constitutional right to panhandle. It just controls the behavior in the location.
right. And that's frustrating. You want to go get a cup of coffee, do some shopping, and here's a guy with a sign, anything will help. Yeah.
There's more resources out there for anyone who's truly in need. And
Right.
don't be caught off guard believing the person who's doing the begging is doing anything more than trying to play on your emotions.
Right, exactly.
If somebody really wants the help, I can assure you there's either our officers or the local organizations, the faith-based community, they are connected and they've been rejected. And so the persistency is there, and that's the purpose of the roundtable, is to organize the stakeholders.
And as a regular attendee of the homeless roundtable meetings, they're pretty effective. We have a huge crowd every time we meet, and people who care. It's clearly indicative of the type of community we have here in Vacaville. So, well, let's keep talking about highlights from 2015. The youth services section was recognized for all their good work as well, weren't they?
Absolutely. You think of YSS, as we call them. Been in the schools since the 70s when you really think about it, but it didn't really organize until, I would say, the mid-'80s to the late '80s with our youth service officers. And most schools around the nation enjoy having what they would call an SRO, a school resource officer.
Right.
Interestingly enough, there's always training and conferences in professions. So much so that last year, it was recognized at the national level that our program, the partnership that we have with our school districts that serve children in town, that Vacaville's program should be highlighted as the model agency of the year nationwide. That is a tremendous recognition for the staff and the community that's allowed this to occur. So it's not one thing, but when you consider that we have 16 interns that provide counseling through the programs, the non-traditional clinical services, alongside with youth service officers in the high schools and the junior high, and our diversion program, and the partnership through our Aware and Reach, some of the programs that are really designed to get youth activity involved.
Right.
It was clear once they submitted this to the national organization, wow, Vacaville does it right.
Right.
And we do, and we're proud of it.
Well, I have to admit, you know, when I first got here, I was hearing about diversion programs and all these services and all this effort, and I was like, man, what have I stepped into here? It's crazy, the focus, and I clearly it pays off. It's the old, you know, spend a dime now or spend $1, you know, whenever. And I think clearly we demonstrate it works. You know,
It does.
look at our crime stats, right? As an
You know,
example.
If you can get to kids early, and again, this is a diversionary pre-probation system, so it's before you enter the criminal justice system.
Right.
We truly believe that through working with families and the kids and the students and on campus, if we can stop it now, then they're not in juvenile hall and they're not in our prison system.
Well, I had the good fortune to sit in on one of these counseling sessions one time. We had to do some work for your department. It was pretty interesting how the whole process worked. The youth comes in and the parent comes in and there's all this discussion and it was pretty intense. And my first thought was, wow, I'd have been in diversion if I was a kid today. But fortunately, I made it through in one piece. But it's a huge program. You get a lot of we have so many good folks in our department and in the city. You know, both sworn, non-sworn, and even in the school district. Clearly, children are important to Vacaville.
It is. The other thing that most people don't realize is you think of traditional police services as the police officer and then just general support staff. But to have the counseling services on staff within the police department, it isn't straight tax dollars from general fund. We receive more than $1 million worth of grants that we manage each year and have for many years that support programs that allow these successful outcomes to occur.
Yeah, and you mentioned Reach, which started out as a grant-funded program, and we're still, you know, seeking out grants to keep it going. I mean, that's the one I'm the most familiar with, and to see some of the kids that have gone through it, and we always point to Carlos in particular, who's really, you know, did a 180 and is graduated from college. It's just amazing. You know, these kids just need a little help, don't they? They just need some of them need a little guidance to get them back on the road, and you know, the sooner you get to them, the better.
Well, you think about getting the youth involved, and it isn't just about government coming forward with the program. And so whether it's, you know, ATOD, you know, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, it's designed to get the youth involved to make a difference with the programs. You know, we have a lot of effective programs that we work out of our special victims unit here on site at City Hall. But it really is through the youth programs that we find our best connection with trying to change the behavior before the problem occurs.
Right. Well, we have a lot of highlights, so let's keep going.
Sure.
One of my favorite is this $750,000 grant you got from Kaiser. That's huge.
It is. You know, it's the first of its kind for us to truly have a public-private partnership. And when you consider that Kaiser, most people who have medical insurance, most people have to today, it's the law, Kaiser is a very strong supporter of the local community, has been since it had its medical facilities and eventually built the hospital, also got its accreditation for the Level 2 Trauma Center. But with that also brings a level of service that draws in people from the entire region, including when we in law enforcement have to deal with not so sightly events, whether it's crimes and homicides and dangerous events. And they do a fantastic job in the way they manage their campus, very large campus, but it's also through a partnership, and we realize that, and so that's where this all began.
And really, it's not to even imply or make people think it's not safe at Kaiser. That's not it at all.
Not at all.
You know, I mean, clearly it's safe out there, but as you just said, sometimes you have some unsavory folks that have to be cared for, and they bring their friends or their friends come. So the presence certainly helps. And those guys aren't there 24 hours a day patrolling the halls of Kaiser.
No.
It's like a substation almost, and they can go to calls in the area, and they have more to do than just patrol the emergency room, for example.
That's right. So the grant funding is a multi-year grant that allows for the funding that it costs for us to staff and to equip and to train, everything that goes with it. And it allows us to have coverage for what we would consider, if you think of an 8-hour work day for someone.
Right.
But 7 days a week there's coverage in that area of town based out of Kaiser Hospital, but not solely for Kaiser.
Right.
The whole neighborhood, when we think of the corridor north of Interstate 80 and east of 505, some industrial areas, there's a few new neighborhoods. So it's a neighborhood grant, and it allows us to do that.
I'm sorry, and they're building, Cino's building, a few thousand homes over there. There's already almost 1,000, if not more, homes up in Browns Valley. There's a huge population of folks. You got the college, you got, it's good that they're there. As a resident of the North Village area, I'm glad there's a couple of officers just a short call away,
We do appreciate the partnership with them, and it's working out very well.
And they gave you one of those huge checks too. I thought that was nice.
It is always interesting. You always think about, what is this like? I always want to go into a bank and say, here's my check.
Right.
So somehow the numbers don't match on the bottom when they say the routing number.
Yeah, and it won't fit in the ATM either. So you got to deal with that. But, well, I'm sure their check's good. So let's talk about social media. Another huge accomplishment for the department. You really kind of jumped in with both feet this year, and the results have been amazing.
Well, social media, you think, is for some people a pastime. For you, it's media is your business, and in law enforcement, we realize the need for communication. This has been a difficult, to say the least, a trying year in law enforcement. It has a lot to do with transparency and the belief that, can we trust the police? And so a lot of what we see is the benefit of having the outreach program, which we kicked off last January, was an intentional design to communicate and connect with people, our community. And that's what we did. We set goals early on. We navigated through the challenges of, can you post, what do you post, what's appropriate, and how do we engage? And it's not just about a post, it's engaging the person who's commenting, and that's how you connect with a community. And what it means today, a year later, is we have about almost 21,000 followers, and I don't look at that as a success. Again, those are numbers.
I do. I'm so totally jealous of you guys, but
Well, I will brag a little bit in the sense that what it has allowed us to do is connect with the community, not just in being able to solve crimes, but to engage a local following that believes in what we're doing. And the flip side is it empowers and creates an attitude and atmosphere with your own staff. Imagine being praised with believing you did a good job.
Right.
How much better you want to do.
Right.
So it actually works both directions. And what we now are setting our next goal at isn't a particular number of followers. It's just, what's our reach? And so in 2016, we believe that our general reach monthly is 500,000 people. And we've seen that in the numbers.
Well, what I tell people is social media efforts in the city of Vacaville reach almost 30,000 people. You're 21,000, and I'm working on almost 9, which I am told is pretty darn good. Certainly in terms of PD, but for the city, that's huge. There's a lot of other cities that have that are much bigger than ours that don't have the following, which again I think has a lot to do with our citizenry. They want to know. They want to know what's going on there. Whether it's crime or a grand opening or just what was that noise I heard last night.
I was standing in a line of a local deli at lunch here in the last couple of weeks, and the conversations always come up. And the customer started saying how much they appreciated that there was actually a personal contact. And you think, well, 20 years ago, law enforcement wasn't in the business of making that kind of personal contact. So what is the worth of the investment? And what I will tell you is that person not only trusts the police, believes in what we're doing, will call, will be a good witness, and will support. So it comes full circle to say this is why you do it.
And I know more than once your efforts have resulted in either solving a crime, getting information about a crime, finding a missing person. Any number of things
That's
have
right.
happened through your social media efforts. And not to segue, but you've got an event coming up Saturday, open house.
This weekend. It's an open house. We did this last summer when we hit another milestone, and it's been 10 years since we've opened the doors to the public. And so we will have an open house this Saturday from 11 to 2. The best way to get to it is it's not through the front doors, but we'll call it the back doors. So there's a big garage roll-up, and you won't be able to miss it.
Where they bring in the perps, isn't that it?
It's to where the car drives out.
Oh,
so
okay.
it would be
All
the
right,
back
all
side of the Sally port. But absolutely, we welcome the community to come out. We'll give some tours, and we just want to engage and thank the supporters, the community, for all that they've done this last year to make it successful. And the way I look at it is all it takes is a media story of negativity and always trying to pit the police of doing something wrong. And we do so much right, the level of professionalism that's there, so we can't ignore it. And so the best way to do it is embrace a relationship with the public. So much so that I will actually say that we have been selected to present this year. And in fact, there's going to be, I think there's a forum in the Sacramento area wanting to know how this is being done here in Vacaville. Cal Chiefs has asked for a presentation to see how does an agency engage the community, and Vacaville's doing it right. So thank you, Vacaville.
Yeah, it's crazy. As I said, even in our office, it's the same thing where, wow, our folks are. I mean, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it.
Not saying we can't make mistakes,
right?
But you have to do this very intentional and make sure you're careful with what you do.
Well, you can find them on Facebook. It's easy.
That's
Vacaville
right.
Police Department. They'll pop up right away.
Yes.
Some other highlights, your efforts with the school district to work on emergency plans. Unfortunately, because of events around the country, we have to be ready for a similar event that hopefully never happens, but potentially could. And hopefully now we're more prepared than ever.
Yes. It's an interesting time since Columbine. In my career, I've seen the shifting with how we respond, and we now today, what most people think of active shooter is an ongoing unfolding event, and that was a term that wasn't around before Columbine.
Right.
But there's been a lot of steps along the way to help people understand that this is a crisis, whether it's San Bernardino, whether it's Sandy Hook, whether it was Columbine that really started this shift. But what we do know is one size fits all doesn't work on the school campus.
Right.
And that's the shift. And so, again, I give praise to our youth services section. And Sergeant Todd Dye went to a training. This is why training is so valuable. And came back and said, we're doing a really good job. But what we really need to do is separate what is a lockdown and a lockout and build into the school's system a multi-layered approach to what do you do if it's not even on the campus, but you just want to secure things. And so that was implemented, and right now we're going through the final stages of training. That policy has been adopted by both our staff and the school district, and so far so good. And so if you hear locked out, it's not a lockdown. That shouldn't make national news. It's simply just our ability to take what we would call a soft target of high value, because it's our kids, and just make sure they're safe.
Come on, John. Come on. You say lock anything in connection with a school, the trucks are going to show up, the satellite dishes are going to be lifted, and we're on TV. But that's just the way it is.
It is the way it is today, and I do get it, as you do in your business.
Right.
Fear, and especially when you're talking about your children and this whole new world of safety in the public places. But there is a smarter way of doing it, and so we are implementing it. And By the end of this month, all staff within the school district should have already received training on how to respond. The key then is making sure the parents do as well.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, it's just another level of safety for our kids.
Yes.
You know, let's face it. Couple more things. Body-worn cameras, really kind of a big deal in a lot of other parts of the country. Not so much for us, but still a significant accomplishment in 2015.
It is. You always look back and say, how did we get here? And when this conversation comes up as if this is just recent news, I have to educate people in saying, well, we've been doing this since 2009. Actually, since before that. But the police department has had a formal body-worn camera program with all officers being issued cameras since then. We're on our third generation. This isn't new. We've even had state legislature representatives and subcommittees come to Vacaville simply to listen and learn and look at what we've done, because we've spearheaded this almost as long as anyone nationwide.
So how come we're so, in a lot of cases, so far ahead of other cities and other agencies? Why is that?
Well, I'm going to give the credit to our staff. And the reason is because we have such professional individuals working for us, sworn and civilian alike, very creative, and our attitude in the department is we're a team, and the best ideas don't always come from the top, they come from within. And so when you find a solution and you find a way to work it into the workplace, and that's how this happened. It organically started with some traffic officers saying, I've been carrying a digital audio recorder for years, but this video recorder back in 2007 and 8 seems to work. And so now policies are being implemented nationwide, and but it really comes from, hey, look, our officers are doing it on their own. Maybe there's something to this.
Yeah, right.
And
I mean, for their own protection,
that's right.
as much as the person they're interacting with, right?
A video does not capture everything, because your eyes, and I always say this, when you watch television or a movie, you get to look at every pixel on the screen, which means there's a scene over to the left, but there's information over to the right. And no different than you right now, you're only looking one direction, but the viewer of a camera gets to look in all directions. So the perception of what goes on sometimes may capture information that's not known.
Right.
But it does add what I call context and texture to an event to determine, are we professional? Are we following the best rule of law? Are we courteous? And it allows us to be able to capture information so that we can better prepare for a report.
Right. And it's funny, I just had a thought flitter through my mind, which was a very short trip, but whenever you call your insurance company or your credit card company or whoever it might be, what's one of the first things you hear? This call may be recorded for training purposes or other uses.
That's right.
Right? Well, and that's, I'm sure a lot of it is training. You know, it's like, we listened to the tape, you did a good job, but here's some things you could have done better, or we would have done this, blah, blah, blah. So it's a tool on top of everything else.
And we do that internally as well.
Right.
It's better to help someone internally say, hey, I think you could have handled that call a bit better.
Right.
So there's a lot of quality control on the inside as well. But I will say over the years, it's always interesting to hear one version and then see another version. And when they're just night and day, oftentimes it makes for interesting conversations with a member of the public who may be wanting to complain. They may have had issues in the past with the police or their belief, but all too often today, the police officer in the field believes in the camera and that it is a form of protection.
Right. Well, finally, and finally, in terms of our list of accomplishments, certainly you guys did a lot of great things in 2015. The first office moved, came home, so to speak, and not only brought some city employees together, but saved us a little money on top of it.
That's right. We used to have our Family Investigative Response Services team, often known as FIRST. It's more modernly known as Special Victims Unit, so SVU. Most people know that term on TV.
Yeah, I watch that show once in a while.
That's right. And so when you think of the fact that the police department also has what we would call our wraparound services, family services section, that's what we did, is we relocated. It's been a long time in the coming. over the last year, and so we're now at the other end of City Hall from the police department. So if you're walking down the City Hall campus at the other end, it's like, well, I thought I just left the police department. Well, it's also on the other end as well.
Yeah, but I think that's partly by design too, isn't it? Because
Yes, it is.
part of why FIRST was off campus in the first place, a little pun there, was to allow victims and others to go and get some assistance without the specter of the police in the background, even though they knew it was a police service being provided, right?
It's true. When you think of a separate counter experience dealing with potential victims, or the Family Resource Center, no different than if somebody was coming to City Hall and looking for services in finance or public works. There's probably the potential for other departments to relocate in City Hall, such as housing and community services.
Right.
So the goal is to try and be a better steward, not only of the cost of off-site rental for us, but to provide the services in a one-stop shop, just not in the main building.
Right.
So far so good. We got all, other than the schools, we have all our staff on site.
Yeah, great. Well, it was a pretty good year, 2015, wasn't it?
Yeah, very exciting.
Your first full year,
Yes.
John. How'd that feel? Good?
It felt good. It felt good. More to come.
Was it what you expected or not what you expected? Different, the same?
A lot of moving parts. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's for me, it's not only an honor, but having started here in the 80s, seeing the city grow, I've seen the departments grow, and I'm pleased. I couldn't be happier with the team that we're building, and just the partnership with the other departments as well.
Good deal. Well, listen, thank you again for all your hard work, and you in the department as well, and thank you for watching this episode of On the Beat.